My son was homeless, shivering on a cold street with his new baby. His wife, meanwhile, was flying first class to Paris. They say blood is thicker than water, but they're wrong. I watched him out there in the cold, clutching my 6-month-old granddaughter, and I felt nothing. I should know. I paid for her ticket. My name is Eleanor Vance. I am 62 years old, and for nearly 40 of those years, I was the head nurse in the intensive care unit at Good Samaritan. You do not run an ICU for 4 decades without developing a certain kind of vision. You learn to see things exactly as they are, not as you wish them to be. You learn to read the subtle signs, the ones people try to hide. Life is fragile. People are messy, and sentimentality is a luxury that can get people killed. I am a widow. I am practical. And I have lived in Portland my entire life. My only son, Mark, is 38. He lives with his wife, Chloe, who is 35, and their new baby, my granddaughter, Lily. She is 6 months old. They live in one of those gleaming glass towers in the Pearl District, a penthouse that overlooks the entire city. It is my penthouse. I bought it years ago as an investment, a hard asset. When Mark married Chloe, I gave it to them to use, rent-free, an early inheritance. I called it. I wanted them to have a stable foundation. I wanted my granddaughter to have the best. I drove over on a Tuesday afternoon to see Lily. The elevator whispered me up to the top floor. I let myself in with my own key. The scene that greeted me was not one of domestic peace. It was a photo shoot. "Mark, can you at least try to look happy?" Chloe snapped. She was in a flowing white dress, her hair perfect. She was holding her phone, aiming it at my son, who was holding Lily. Mark, my son, looked exhausted, dark circles under his eyes. He forced a smile for the camera. "Sorry, honey. Like this, is this better?" "It just looks so forced." Chloe sighed, tapping furiously at her screen. "My followers expect authentic joy. This algorithm is burying me." Chloe is what they call a lifestyle influencer. Her social media presence is a carefully curated fantasy of serene motherhood, minimalist beige interiors, and expensive coffee. The apartment, in her pictures, is immaculate. The apartment I was standing in was a disaster. Piles of designer shopping bags and cardboard boxes were shoved against one wall. Empty food delivery containers littered the marble kitchen island. The whole place smelled faintly sour, like old milk and stale takeout. Chloe finally noticed me standing by the door. The irritation vanished from her face, replaced by a smile that was bright, brittle, and did not reach her eyes. "Eleanor, I didn't know you were stopping by." I called. "Dear, I wanted to see my granddaughter." "Right. Well," she said, her eyes already back on her phone, her thumb scrolling. "We're in the middle of something." I ignored her and walked toward my son. "Hello, Mark." "Hey, Mom." He looked relieved for the interruption, kissing my cheek. I looked down at Lily. She was beautiful, a perfect little thing wrapped in a swaddle that probably cost more than my first car. Her dark eyes were wide open, staring at the ceiling light. My arms ached to hold her. It is a physical pull. I reached out, my hands steady. "Hello, sweet girl. Come to Grandma." "She just fell asleep," Chloe said sharply, not looking up from her phone. "Please don't wake her." I stopped. I looked closely at Lily. Her eyes were still open. Her little fist was waving gently in the air. I looked at Chloe, who was now muttering about engagement rates. I am a retired ICU nurse. I have cared for thousands of infants. I know the difference between a sleeping baby and an awake one. I said nothing. I simply pulled my hands back. I turned away, pretending to admire the view of the Fremont Bridge. My gaze drifted to the dining room table, buried under junk mail and magazines. A single white envelope sat on top, a credit card statement. It was addressed to Mark. I saw the balance due, a number with 5 figures, and I saw the list of charges visible through the little window: Gucci, Chanel, Louis Vuitton, thousands and thousands of dollars. Mark saw me looking. He moved faster than I'd seen him move all day, snatching the bill off the table and crumpling it in his hand. "Just junk mail, Mum," he said, forcing a laugh. "You know, stuff for the baby." I looked at the mountain of designer bags in the corner. She certainly is a well-dressed baby. Mark's face flushed. He couldn't meet my eyes. I did not stay long after that. The air in that penthouse was too thin to breathe. I kissed Lily's forehead, she was still asleep, and told Mark I would see him soon. In the elevator, the unease settled over me, cold and heavy. I thought of my husband, a firefighter, who died running into a burning building when Mark was 10. I never remarried. I worked. I worked double shifts for decades. I missed holidays. I missed birthdays. I missed my own life. All to ensure Mark would have everything. I gave him the college fund. I bailed out his first failed business. I gave him this penthouse. I had given my son the world, and he had handed it, and my granddaughter, to a woman who would rather stare at a phone than hold her own child. I got into my car in the parking garage. The engine hummed to life. But I didn't move. I pulled out my phone. I opened an application. It was not social media. It was a financial monitoring program, the kind used for corporate expense accounts. I had installed it on Mark's phone 2 years ago. When he first started getting serious with Chloe, I told him it was for security, in case his phone was stolen. He was, as always, careless and trusting. He never questioned it. I looked at the live feed. The credit card bill I saw upstairs was nothing. It was the tip of a very large, very expensive iceberg. I saw every purchase, every restaurant, every Uber ride. I saw the browsing history filled with 5-star resorts and European travel blogs. Chloe was not just spending his money. She was liquidating his future. And that bill I saw, the one he lied about, was just the beginning. The man who lied about that credit card bill was not the son I had raised. Or perhaps he was, and I had simply refused to see it. I remembered Mark at 20, his first real venture, a disastrous attempt at a high-end food truck. He had sunk every penny he had, and some he didn't, into it. I found him sitting on the curb by the garage where the bank was repossessing the truck. He was just a boy, really, his face buried in his hands. He was so ashamed, he could barely speak. He told me he had lost it all. I sat down next to him on that dirty curb. I was 44 then. I had just finished another 12-hour shift. I had my retirement fund, a nest egg I had guarded ferociously since his father died. I took a breath, and I cashed out nearly half of it. I wrote him a check. It was enough to clear his debts and start over. He cried. He held my hands, his own calloused from the kitchen work. "You're number one, Mum," he whispered, his voice thick. "Always. I'll never let you down, I promise. I will make this up to you." He meant it. Then, I truly believe he meant it. That promise echoed in my head. tinny and false, as I sat in my own quiet home on the lake, staring at the email on my laptop. It had arrived an hour after I left the penthouse. The subject line was New Business Opportunity. I read the carefully crafted sentences. He was so excited to tell me about a groundbreaking new venture. He just needed a little seed capital to get it off the ground. He was asking to borrow $50,000 against the trust fund his father had left him. The trust I controlled until he was 40. It was Chloe's voice, typed out by my son's fingers. I knew it instantly. I opened the tracking application on my computer. I didn't need to see his bank accounts. I just needed his browser history. There it was. He had not been looking up venture capital. He had been looking up flights, first-class tickets from Portland to Charles de Gaulle. He had been on Chloe's favorite designer websites, ones that had virtual storefronts in Paris. He had been researching suites at Le Maurice. This was not a business investment. This was a European shopping trip. My hand was steady as I picked up the phone and dialed his number. "Mom," he answered, his voice artificially bright. "Did you get my email?" "I got it. Mark." "So, what do you think? It's a huge opportunity? The partners are—" "No." The brightness vanished. "What do you mean?" "No." "I mean, no. I am not releasing $50,000 from the trust." "But I need it." His voice was rising, getting thin and reedy, the way it did when he was a child about to have a tantrum. "This is important. This is for my family, for Lily's future." "Is it?" I kept my voice perfectly flat, because I was under the impression that Lily's future looked a lot like a first-class seat to Paris. "Is that the investment Chloe is planning?" There was a dead, cold silence on the other end of the line. I could hear his sharp intake of breath. I could also hear a faint whisper in the background. Chloe's voice. Then Mark's voice returned. But it was not my son's. It was a snarl. "You have been spying on me. I have been protecting my assets. You are trying to ruin my happiness," he shouted, the words tumbling out. "Chloe needs this. She works hard. You are just trying to control me, just like you always have." "Mark, stop this." "No, you stop it. You are just a jealous old woman. You are jealous because I have a real family and you don't—" The line clicked. He had hung up on me. I sat there, holding the phone. I looked at the dark screen. That was not Mark's anger. That was Chloe's. The words were hers. The cruelty was hers. He was just the mouthpiece, the hollow puppet she spoke through. I knew she was standing right next to him, her hand on his arm, her mouth whispering the script. But the weakness that let her in, that was all Mark. This was not the first betrayal. It was not even the worst. The worst had come 3 months ago, on a cold, rainy Thursday. I had been reaching for a book on the top shelf in my living room. I used a small step stool. I missed my footing. The fall was quick, and the sound of my hip snapping was sickeningly sharp, louder than the crash. The pain was immediate, white-hot and absolute. I lay on the hardwood floor for 10 minutes, just breathing, before I could reach the phone on the coffee table. My first call was to Mark. He picked up on the 5th ring. His voice was impatient. "Mum, I'm just walking into a meeting. A huge meeting. Can't it wait?" "Mark," I gasped, the pain making my vision swim. "I have fallen. I think my hip is broken. I need you to—" "God. Mum, are you serious?" He sighed, an actual sigh of annoyance. "Okay, look. I can't leave. It's a massive deal. Just call 911. They'll take care of you. I'll check in when I'm out. I have to go." He hung up. I lay there on the floor. Then, I called 911. I called an ambulance for myself. I spent 4 days at Good Samaritan in my old unit. My former colleagues, the nurses I had trained, bustled around me. They were kind, but their eyes were full of pity. No one asked where my son was. They knew. When I was stable and back home, propped up on my sofa, I opened the tracking app. The huge meeting had been in the first-class lounge at Portland International. The massive deal was a last-minute luxury vacation package. While I was lying on an emergency room gurney, my son and his wife were checking into a $4,000 a night beachfront cabana in Hawaii. He had used the emergency credit card I gave him, the one linked to my name, to pay for the flights. He had left me alone, in agony, to go on vacation. He had not just lied. He had chosen. After the phone call, I let the silence in my house settle for a week. I let him stew in the poison that Chloe was feeding him. Then, on a Monday, I called him back. My voice was soft. I apologized for our fight. I told him I had been hasty, that his happiness was important to me. "Why don't you and Chloe come to my house for dinner on Friday?" I said. I did not mean the penthouse. I meant my real home, the quiet villa I owned on Lake Oswego, the house my husband and I had bought, the one I had kept separate from Mark's life. "We can celebrate, and we can talk about the $50,000. I baited the hook. He took it. Friday night arrived, cold and clear. I spent the afternoon cooking, not with love, but with a kind of cold, methodical precision. I made a standing rib roast, roasted root vegetables, and a rich gravy. I baked a dark chocolate cake. I set the dining table with my best china, the silver my mother had left me, and crystal glasses. The room looked like a magazine cover, a portrait of familial warmth. I was setting a stage. Every prop had its place. The doorbell rang at precisely 7. Chloe swept in first, wearing a sleeveless, backless dress that was absurd for a November night in Oregon. It was a bold, vibrant red, and I recognized it from a fashion blog Chloe followed. It cost more than $3,000. She looked triumphant, her smile brittle and sharp. She had won. The old woman was going to open the checkbook. Mark followed behind her, carrying Lily in her portable car seat. He looked awful. He was pale, thinner than he had been a week ago, and his eyes were dark and hollow. He would not look at me. He just mumbled, "Hi, Mum," and shuffled past me into the dining room. We sat down. The dinner was a masterpiece of tension. The clinking of my heavy silver forks against the china plates was the loudest sound for the first few minutes. Then Chloe started. She did not eat. She picked at the roast and drank her wine, talking non-stop. "The opportunities in Europe are just staggering." "Eleanor," she said, her voice bright and false. "The US market is completely saturated. My brand." "Our brand," she corrected, glancing at Mark. "Needs a global presence. It's the only way to scale. Paris is the logical first step for expansion." Mark said nothing. He stared at his plate, meticulously cutting his expensive meat into tiny, perfect squares he did not eat. "And how does Lily factor into this global expansion?" I asked, my voice calm. "Oh, well, that's the beauty of the lifestyle brand," Chloe said with a wave of her hand, her rings glittering. "Motherhood is part of the brand. People love to see a baby, especially in Paris. I let her talk for another 10 minutes. I let her spin her fantasy of brand partnerships and influencer summits. I refilled her wine glass. I watched Mark shrink in his chair. Finally, I set my knife and fork down, crossing them neatly on my plate. The clink was sharp in the quiet room. Chloe stopped talking. "Mark," I said, my voice cutting through the heavy air. "I have considered your request for the $50,000 from your trust." Chloe leaned forward. This was it. Her smile was practically vibrating with greed. Mark looked up, a flicker of desperate hope in his exhausted eyes. "The answer is no." Chloe's face froze. The smile shattered. Her eyes narrowed into slits. "What did you say?" Mark flinched, bracing for the explosion. "I will not be releasing $50,000 for Mark," I said. Then, I turned my full attention to Chloe. I looked directly into her cold, calculating eyes. "But I am prepared to make a different offer. To you, Chloe." Mark looked confused. "Mum, what are you—" "I will give you," I said, my voice level and clear, $100,000, cash, transferred to an offshore account of your choosing by morning. The room went utterly still. You could not hear a breath. Mark's mouth was hanging open. Chloe's eyes, which had been moments from flashing with rage, now widened in pure, unadulterated shock. And then, a split second later, that shock was replaced by a bright, hungry light. "What's the catch?" she whispered. "It is very simple," I said. I folded my hands on the table, as if discussing a patient's care plan. "First, you will leave Portland within 24 hours, alone. Second, you will never return to Oregon or to the United States. Third, you will sign a legally binding document, which is already prepared, terminating all of your parental rights to Lily, permanently. And fourth," I concluded, "you will sign a non-disclosure agreement, forbidding you from ever contacting me, Mark, or Lily, in any form, for the rest of your life." Mark finally found his voice. It was a horrified gasp. "Mum, you're insane. You can't be serious, Chloe. This is crazy. Tell her it's crazy." He turned to his wife, his face pleading. He was looking for his partner, his co-conspirator. He was expecting her to be as outraged as he was. Chloe did not look at him. She was staring at me. Her mind was working, the gears turning, calculating. Then, a slow, ugly smile spread across her face. She started to laugh. It was not a pleasant sound. It was a short, sharp bark of pure derision. She finally turned to look at her husband. $100,000, she scoffed. "Is that all you think he's worth?" She looked back at me. "Honestly, Eleanor, you're getting a bargain." She picked up her wine glass and took a long, slow sip. "Where do I sign?" Mark just sat there, frozen. His face went from confusion to disbelief to a kind of ashen, hollow horror. He looked at his wife, the woman he had betrayed me for. He had just watched her sell him and their daughter without a moment's hesitation. The sound of his world breaking was perfectly, terribly silent. I am not a person who gambles, but I am a person who plans. I do not make moves without knowing the outcome. Chloe's acceptance was not a possibility. It was a certainty I had already factored in. "Excellent," I said, standing up from the table. "My lawyer is waiting for us at his office. We should go now." Chloe's eyes went wide again, this time with a flash of suspicion. "Now it's almost 10 o'clock at night. You have a flight to catch, I said, picking up my car keys from the sideboard. The one you've been researching. The 1 a.m. flight to Paris. I took the liberty of booking you a seat. First class. Her suspicion vanished, replaced by that hungry, feral grin. She had been played, but she was getting exactly what she wanted. She didn't care about the game. She had just won the prize. Mark was still a statue at the table, a piece of half-chewed meat still on his fork. Mom, Chloe, you're not. This isn't real. Get Lily. Mark, I said. My voice was the one I used in the ICU during a code blue. No room for argument. We are leaving. He looked at me, then at his wife, who was already grabbing her purse and her ridiculous $3,000 coat. He did as he was told. He unclipped the baby carrier, his movements wooden, robotic. Lily was fast asleep, oblivious. The drive to the lawyer's office in downtown Portland was silent. I drove. Chloe sat in the passenger seat, tapping her nails on the dashboard, vibrating with impatience. Mark sat in the back with his daughter, a ghost in the rearview mirror. Mr. Graves was a man I had known for 30 years. He had handled my husband's estate. He was precise, ruthless, and entirely discreet. His office on the 50th floor was dark, save for the bright lights of the conference room. The polished mahogany table reflected the city lights like a dark river. A stack of documents was waiting. Mrs. Vance, Graves said, nodding to me. He looked at Chloe. Please have a seat. You will want to read these carefully. I don't need to read, Chloe said, snatching the pen. Just show me where to sign. Graves raised an eyebrow. As you wish. This first document is the irrevocable relinquishment of parental rights. You are terminating all legal and physical claims to the minor child, Lily Vance, effective immediately. Chloe signed, her signature a violent slash of ink. This, Graves continued, pushing the next document forward, is a binding non-disclosure and no-contact agreement. You are agreeing, in perpetuity, to never contact, communicate with, or attempt to locate Eleanor Vance, Mark Vance, or Lily Vance. You will not write about them, speak about them, or reference them in any media, online or otherwise. The penalties for violation are severe. She signed again, faster this time. I sat at the head of the table, my phone in my hand. The account, I said. Chloe rattled off a string of numbers for an account in the Cayman Islands. I typed them in. I initiated the wire transfer for $100,000. I hit confirm. The transaction was instant. Done, I said. Chloe's phone buzzed a second later with the alert. A genuine, ecstatic smile lit up her face. She had her money. I slid a simple white envelope across the table. Your ticket. The car service Mr. Graves has arranged is waiting downstairs. It will take you directly to the airport. Your luggage. I'm afraid. You will have to do without. I'll buy new, she said, giddy, standing up. Only then did Mark seem to wake up. He stood, his voice cracking. Chloe, wait. You can't just leave. What about Lily? She's your daughter. Chloe turned, zipping her coat. She looked at Mark for the first time since dinner. Her expression was not angry. It was not sad. It was pure, unadulterated contempt. You have nothing, Mark, she said, her voice flat. You are an empty suit. Your mother has everything. She has all the money, all the power. You are just a failure she's been carrying your whole life. I was with a winner. You are not one. She walked over to the baby carrier, which Mark had placed on the floor. Lily was still sleeping. Chloe looked down at her for a second. She did not reach out to touch her. She blew a kiss into the air above the carrier. Bon voyage, she whispered. Then she turned, her heels clicking on the marble floor, and walked out of the office with Mr. Graves. The door shut with a heavy, final click. Mark sank into one of the leather chairs. He put his head in his hands and made a dry, choking sound. I did not comfort him. I picked up the baby carrier. Lily was starting to stir, making a small, fussy noise. It is time to go home. Mark, I said. The ride back to the Pearl District was as silent as the ride there. Mark followed me out of the elevator, his feet dragging. He looked like a dead man walking. I carried Lily. We reached the polished oak door of the penthouse. My penthouse. I stopped and handed him the baby carrier. You should take her. He fumbled with it, his hands shaking. He then reached into his pocket for his key fob, the one I had given him, and held it up to the electronic lock. The light flashed red. Access denied. He tried again. Red. He looked at the lock, confused. He tried a third time, jiggling it. Red. It's broken, he mumbled, his voice hoarse. The key isn't working. He looked at me, his eyes wide and panicked in the sterile hallway light. Mum, your key. Open the door. I looked at the lock, then at him. I feigned a mild, forgetful surprise. Oh, I said, my voice light. How silly of me. I must have forgotten to tell you. Forgotten what? He asked, his voice shaking. I changed the locks. Last week, actually. Your fob was deactivated this evening at 10 p.m., right on schedule. I used my own key, inserted it into the lock, and the light flashed green. I pushed the heavy door open, revealing the warm, dark, and empty penthouse inside. I stepped over the threshold. Mum, wait, he said, his voice cracking with a rising panic. Mum, open the door. It is cold out here. The hallway was not heated, and a draft was coming from the elevator bank. Outside, I could hear the sound of Portland's winter rain lashing against the windows. I turned around in the doorway. I looked at him. My son. He was holding my granddaughter in a carrier. He looked pathetic. Broken. This is not your house. Mark, I said, my voice as quiet and hard as the marble floor. It never was. It is my property. The last bit of fog cleared from his eyes. The confusion, the disbelief, it all vanished, replaced by a sick, dawning comprehension. He finally saw it. He finally saw me. You planned this, he whispered, his voice hoarse. This whole night. The dinner? The money? You planned all of it. You set her up. You trapped Chloe. I did no such thing, I said, my voice calm. I offered her a choice. The same choice you had. Mark. Money. Or family. She just chose more quickly than you did. I simply gave her exactly what she wanted. And in doing so, I showed you exactly who she is. The woman you chose over your own mother. His face crumpled. The realization of his own stupidity, his own weakness, hit him like a physical blow. But what about me? What about Lily? He held up the carrier, his new shield. You cannot just leave us out here in the hallway. We have nowhere to go. She's your granddaughter. This was the moment, the pivot point I had been waiting for. You had a place to go, I said. the iciness in my voice matching the air in the hall. You had a home. You had a mother. And you chose her. You stood in that penthouse, the one I paid for, and you cursed at me for her. You let her treat me like dirt. You let her, and you, abandon me when I was in a hospital bed with a broken hip, so you could go to Hawaii. I took a step back, my hand on the doorknob. You told me I was a jealous old woman. You said I was jealous because you had a real family. Do you remember saying that? Mark. He stared at me, his mouth open, speechless. Well, I said, your real family is currently 30,000 feet over the Atlantic, on her way to Paris with my money. And this cold hallway, this is the consequence of your choice. I did not slam the door. I am not a dramatic woman. I pulled the heavy door closed calmly, deliberately. I listened to the expensive, well-oiled mechanism, and then I turned the deadbolt. The click of the heavy steel sliding into the frame was the loudest, most satisfying sound I have ever heard. For a moment, there was silence. I stood in the dark foyer, breathing. Then it started. A desperate, frantic pounding. Mum, open the door. Please, it's not funny. I walked over to the peephole and looked through. His face was distorted by the lens, pale and terrified. Mum, damn it. Lily is getting cold. It's freezing out here. You can't do this? You can't do this to your own granddaughter. He was sobbing now, a desperate, ugly sound. He pounded on the door with both fists, rattling it in the frame. Open the door, please. Mum, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I watched him. I felt nothing. No pity, no anger, just a quiet, cold finality. The last bit of diseased sentimentality being carved out of me. He beat on the door for several minutes, his cries echoing in the hallway. I did not move. I did not make a sound. I had, of course, called Viridian Security, the building management, 2 days ago. I had informed them that an unauthorized person, an ex-boyfriend of one of my employees, might be attempting to gain access to my unit tonight. I described Mark. I told them he might become emotional or cause a disturbance. I assured them he was not dangerous, merely persistent, and that under no circumstances were they to intervene or call the police. They were, I instructed, to simply ignore him until he left of his own accord. They had assured me, as a high-value owner, that my privacy would be respected. I watched through the peephole as my son, my only child, slid down the wall, his shoulders shaking, clutching his 6-month-old daughter in the cold, empty hall. And I just stood there, in the dark, watching. I did not move. I heard him slide down the door, his back thudding against the wood. It was quiet for a long time. I checked the clock on the kitchen wall. It was nearly 2 a.m. He was out there, sitting on the cold floor of a sterile hallway, my granddaughter in his arms. Lily was wrapped in the thin blanket he had grabbed from the car seat. I knew he was on his phone, scrolling desperately. He would be calling the friends who used to drink his free champagne, the ones who loved the view from the penthouse. But those people do not answer their phones at 2 a.m. on a Saturday, not for a friend in need. They only answer for an invitation. I knew, also, what he would be discovering next. He would try to call an Uber. The app would reject his payment. He would try to book a room at a hotel, any hotel. His cards would be declined. The moment Chloe had signed those papers, while she was giddy and imagining her new life in Paris, I had made a call, I had reported significant, fraudulent activity on all of my accounts. I told my private banker I suspected my son's identity had been compromised by a sophisticated international ring and to freeze everything. His credit cards, his debit cards, the joint account I had funded. They were all locked. He was, for the first time in his 38 years of life, completely and utterly penniless. I walked from the foyer into my living room, the one in the penthouse. It was warm. I made myself a cup of tea. I sat in the dark, looking out at the rain streaking the glass, the lights of the city bleeding into a watercolour. And then I heard it. It was faint, but it was unmistakable. It was the sound of a baby crying. Lily. It was not a loud, angry cry. It was a thin, miserable, cold cry. A sound of genuine distress. It cut through the steel and the concrete and the heavy oak door. It reached me. My hand tightened on the mug. A tremor ran through me. This was my son. This was my granddaughter. An innocent child, my husband, my dead husband, would have been ashamed of me. I stood up. I took one step toward the door. I could fix this. I could open it. I could take the baby, put her in a warm bath, and put my son on the couch. I could be his mother again. I stopped. I closed my eyes, and I remembered the real betrayal. It was not the vacation to Hawaii. It was not the insults he had hurled at me over the phone. That was all just noise, the symptoms of the disease. The disease itself was something far darker. It was 3 years ago. I was 59. I had gone for my routine mammogram, as I did every year. A few days later, a call from my doctor, a shadow, a biopsy. Then the meeting with my oncologist, a man I had worked with for 2 decades at Good Samaritan. "Eleanor," he said, his voice gentle. "It's malignant. Stage 1. The protocol was simple. Standard of care. A lumpectomy, followed by radiation and a mild course of chemotherapy to be safe. The prognosis was excellent. I was a nurse. I understood the science. I was scared. But I was practical. I told Mark. He was deeply involved with Chloe by then, completely under her spell. He and Chloe came to my house, their faces masks of grave, counterfeit concern. "Mum? You can't," Mark said, his voice urgent. He was pacing my living room. "You can't let them pump you full of that poison. Chemotherapy is the real killer." Chloe sat beside me, her hand on my arm. Her touch felt like ice. "Eleanor," she said, her voice soft and persuasive. "We know this incredible clinic. It's a holistic approach. They don't use chemicals. They use advanced alternative therapies. Intravenous vitamins, hyperbaric oxygen, specialized sound frequencies. They have a 90% success rate." "That is quackery, Chloe," I said, my voice sharp. "I am a medical professional." "She's a friend of mine," Chloe pressed. "She runs the clinic. She cured a friend of her own mother's. It's expensive, of course. But what is money when it's your life?" I refused. But Mark broke me. He pleaded. He cried. He accused me of giving up. He accused me of not loving him enough to try. He made me feel that my practicality was a betrayal of his love. I was weak. I was scared of the cancer. But I was more scared of losing my son. I relented. I agreed to try their therapy. I wrote check after check. Hundreds of thousands of dollars. I went to the clinic, which was a glorified spa. I sat in a leather chair while they pumped me full of useless saline and vitamin C. All the while, Chloe's friend smiled. and Mark told me how much better I looked. After 6 weeks, I went back to my real oncologist, Dr. Patel, just to check. He put the new scans up on the light box. He was silent for a full minute. The tumour was no longer stage 1. It had doubled in size. It had become aggressive. "Eleanor, what have you done?" he asked. I had to have an emergency mastectomy. The chemotherapy I endured was not mild. It was a brutal, sickening poison that almost killed me. I lost everything. My hair, my strength, a year of my life. Dr. Patel, a good man, did some research. The clinic was a shell corporation, the friend of Chloe's. She was being investigated for fraud in 2 other states. They had almost killed me. My son, in his weakness, and his wife, in her greed, had looked at my cancer as a financial opportunity. They were harvesting my assets while I sat in their fake clinic, dying. That was the day I installed the tracking software. That was the day my son, the boy I loved, died. The man who was left was just a problem to be managed. I opened my eyes. I was back in the penthouse. I could still hear Lily crying, a faint, desperate sound. I walked back to my chair, sat down, and took another sip of my tea. It had gone cold. At precisely 6 a.m., I opened the deadbolt. The hallway was grey with the first weak light of a Portland winter morning. He was exactly where I had left him, slumped against the opposite wall. Mark was asleep, his head on his chest, his arms wrapped protectively around the baby carrier. Lily was, thankfully, quiet. A uniformed security guard from Viridian stood 10 feet away, his arms crossed, watching. He was the morning relief, no doubt briefed by the night shift. He just nodded at me, his face impassive. I stepped into the hallway. Mark. His head snapped up. His eyes were bloodshot, raw, and wild, with a mix of fear and exhaustion. He scrambled to his feet, a man twice his age, his body stiff from the cold floor. "Mum," he croaked, his voice a dry rasp. "Mum, thank God. It's so cold. Lily." I said nothing. I held out a plain white business envelope. He stared at it, confused, as if he had never seen one before. He made no move to take it. I pushed it into the center of his chest. His hand, finally, shakily, came up to grab it. He fumbled with the flap. His fingers were stiff. He pulled out the contents. It was a Greyhound bus ticket, one way, from Portland to Eugene, and 5 crisp $100 bills. He looked at the ticket, then at the money, then at me. The comprehension was not there. He was too tired, too broken. What is this?" "It is my compassion," I said, my voice clear and steady in the quiet hall. "The bus leaves in 2 hours. Eugene is a cheaper city. You will have a better chance there. And that is $500. It is substantially more than the $0 you left for me when you flew to Hawaii. And it is infinitely more mercy than you showed me when you and that woman tried to kill me with fake cancer therapies." His face went ashen. The mention of the cancer, the one unpardonable sin, hit him like a slap. I don't understand," he stammered. "We can't. We'll just get our things. We'll pack." He gestured, weakly, at the door to the penthouse behind me. "That will not be possible," I said. "What do you mean I need Lily's diapers, her formula, my clothes?" "This penthouse," I said, "was sold last week. The new owners take possession this afternoon. You cannot go back inside. The sale is final. That broke through the fog. That, finally, he understood. The panic was immediate, his eyes darting to the door and back to my face. Sold, but our things, my things, Lily's crib, her entire life is in there. What did you do with our things? I am not a monster. Mark, I am a logistician. I had a professional moving service pack the contents of your bedroom and the nursery yesterday afternoon, while you were preparing for your celebratory dinner. Every item is accounted for. It has all been transported to a secure, climate-controlled storage unit. I reached into my pocket and pulled out a key. A simple, brass key to a padlock. I placed it in his hand, on top of the bus ticket. That is the key. The address is on the tag. You have exactly 30 days to retrieve your belongings. After 30 days, the contents of the unit will be auctioned to cover the storage fees. I suggest you find a job quickly. He looked at the key. He looked at the bus ticket. He looked at the $500. And he finally understood the totality of it. He saw the structure I had built around him, the precise, interlocking, legal trap. He saw that this was not a fit of anger. This was an execution. My trust, he whispered. The last shred of hope. The money from Dad. You can't keep that from me. I'll get a lawyer. You will do nothing, I said, cutting him off. By all means, try to contact Mr. Graves. He will be happy to explain the terms of your father's will to you. The trust was established with a standard morals clause, a provision against actions of gross moral turpitude or felonious conduct against any member of the family. I believe attempting to defraud your mother of hundreds of thousands of dollars through a fake medical clinic, an act which directly led to the advancement of her cancer, qualifies as a violation. Mr. Graves agrees. Your trust was permanently dissolved yesterday morning. The assets were forfeited. I looked at him. My son, this hollowed-out stranger. He had nothing, less than nothing. By the way, I added, as a final thought, that $500 is all that remains of your inheritance. Spend it wisely. I watched the elevator doors close, taking him away. The security guard gave me a short, professional nod, and I went back inside the penthouse. I did not stay long. I gathered my purse, walked out, and never looked back. My son was homeless, shivering in the cold dawn with his baby. His wife was on a plane to Paris. Everything was exactly as it should be. I went back to my real home on the lake. I resumed my quiet life. I did not check the tracking app. I had deleted it. The strings were cut. But I knew what his new life would be. With $500 and a bus ticket to Eugene, he would not be renting an apartment. He and Lily would be in a motel room on the edge of the highway, the kind that charges by the week and smells of stale cigarettes and bleach. For the first time in his 38 years, Mark would have to work. He had no resume, no references, and no skills beyond spending my money. He would have to take the first thing he could get. I pictured him under the fluorescent lights of a gas station on the graveyard shift, stocking shelves, wiping up spilled coffee. He would be cold, his hands soft and uncalloused, learning the brutal exhaustion of manual labor. He would have to learn how to be a father, alone in that single room. He would learn to measure formula, to change diapers, to walk the floor at 3 a.m. with a crying baby. He would be doing it all in a haze of panic and exhaustion. He would be miserable. He would be lonely. And he would. in the midst of that solitary struggle, finally and truly begin to love his daughter. It would be a love forged in necessity, not convenience. It would be the first real thing he had ever built for himself. And while my son was stacking soda bottles in a cooler, his wife was having a very different experience. About 3 weeks later, an email landed in my inbox. It was from Chloe. The subject line was a series of furious, misspelled curses. She wrote, in a living nightmare. She accused me of trapping her. She was stranded in Paris, and she had no money. It turned out that the Cayman Islands account she had so cleverly set up was not as clever as she thought. The $100,000 was, after all, a significant international wire transfer from a United States citizen. As a concerned, law-abiding citizen, I had felt it was my duty to report the transaction. The morning after I put her on that plane, I had placed a call to the Internal Revenue Service. I explained, in a very distressed voice, that I feared I had been the victim of a complex extortion scheme. I had been forced, I told them, to wire a large sum of money to a suspicious offshore account to ensure my family's safety. I said, terribly worried about the legal and tax implications for myself. I just wanted to do the right thing and report it, so it would not cause me any trouble. The IRS, as I knew they would, was very grateful. They do not like large, untaxed sums of money moving to foreign accounts. They immediately flagged the transaction and contacted their counterparts in the French government. When Chloe arrived in Paris and attempted to access her small fortune, she triggered an international money laundering and fraud investigation. The account was not just frozen, it was seized. My $100,000 was now locked in a legal vault, where it would remain, pending an investigation that would likely last for years. She was trapped, stranded in the most expensive city in the world, with no money, no friends, and no way home. She could not even fly back to the United States. The non-disclosure agreement she had so eagerly signed was a legal steel trap. If she set foot on American soil, Mr. Graves would have her arrested and sued into permanent silence. She was stuck in her Parisian dream, with nothing but the designer dress she had worn to dinner. I read her email, in which she threatened me with lawyers she could not afford and consequences she could not deliver. Then I marked it as spam and went to water my garden. 6 months passed. The silence was absolute. I sold the house on the lake, the place where I had hosted that final, surgical dinner. I bought a small, rugged cottage on the Oregon coast, near Cannon Beach. I needed the ocean, the relentless sound of the waves, the cold, clean, salt air. It was a good place to be alone. Winter settled in, harder than usual. The storms rolled in off the Pacific, one after another, lashing the shore with rain and wind. I spent my evenings by the fire, reading, listening to the house creak and groan against the weather. I was at peace. One night, well after midnight, my phone rang. I did not recognize the number. It was not a Portland area code. It was from Eugene. I stared at it for 3 full rings, my heart suddenly a cold, heavy stone in my chest. I answered. Hello. For a moment, there was just the sound of desperate, ragged breathing. Then, a voice I barely recognized. It was a rasp, broken and raw. Mom. I said nothing. Mom, please, it's Mark. I know, I said. Mom, I need... God, Mom, I need help. He was sobbing, a choked, desperate sound that was half cough. It's Lily. She's so sick. Mom. I sat up in my chair. The fire had burned down to embers. She's at Sacred Heart. He rushed on, the words tumbling out. She has pneumonia. Her fever. It's so high. She's having trouble breathing. They have her in an oxygen tent. He was rambling, the panic making him incoherent. I don't have any money. Mum, I lost the job at the gas station. I have nothing. They asked for insurance. I don't have any. They're talking about payment, and I don't. What do you want me to do? Mark. My voice was flat, colder than the wind outside. He stopped, as if I had hit him. There was a long, terrible silence. I could hear a muffled announcement over a hospital PA system in the background. When he spoke again, his voice was different. The panic was gone, replaced by a devastating, hollow calm. I am not asking for me. You can let me die in the street. I deserve it. I know that. I'm not asking for me. He took a sharp breath. I'm asking for her. For Lily. She's just a baby. She never did anything to you. She never did anything to anyone. Please. You were a nurse. You were the best nurse. You know what this means. You know how sick she is. I looked out the window, at the black, churning ocean. I could hear him crying, that broken, hopeless sound. I know I was a bad son, he whispered. I know. I know what I did. I was nothing. I was a monster. But she is innocent. Lily is innocent. Please, Mom. Please don't let my baby die because of me. I sat there for what felt like an hour. He did not say anything else. He just waited. The decision was mine. The life of my granddaughter was in my hands. This was the final move on the board. I could let the consequences play out to their final, tragic end, or I could intervene. Forgiveness, or justice. My old life. The nurse in me, the mother in me, wrestled with the woman I had become, the cold, precise instrument of consequence. Finally, I spoke. I will be there. I hung up the phone. I did not move from my chair. I sat in the dark, the phone heavy in my lap. The storm raged outside. My choice was made. I could drive to Eugene. I could walk into that hospital, write a check, and save her. I could take Mark back. I could be a mother. I could be a grandmother. I sat there, facing the ghost of the woman I had been. Then, I picked up the phone. I did not call the hospital. I did not call my bank. I dialed the private number for Mr. Graves. He, like me, was a person who did not sleep. He answered on the first ring. Graves. Mr. Graves, I said, my voice steady. It's Eleanor Vance. I know, he said. It is time, I said. Activate the Lily Fund. The drive to Eugene was 2 hours in the driving rain. I was not emotional. I was not conflicted. I was an administrator, driving to a satellite office to sign paperwork. The woman who had sat by the fire, the one who had felt a tremor of weakness, was gone. The nurse was gone. The mother was gone. Only Eleanor Vance, the executor of a long and complicated will, was in the car. Sacred Heart was like any hospital at 4 a.m, a place of hushed panic, fluorescent lights, and the smell of antiseptic and burnt coffee. I did not go to the pediatric intensive care unit. I did not ask to see my granddaughter. I went directly to the admissions and finance office. A tired-looking woman sat behind the glass. I gave her my name and my granddaughter's name. She was expecting me. As I was standing there, a door burst open down the hall. Mark. He must have been watching the entrance like a hawk. He ran toward me, his face a wreck of desperate, grateful relief. He looked 10 years older. He was gaunt, unshaven, and wearing a stained, thin hoodie. He smelled like a motel room and old fear. "Mom!" he gasped, skidding to a stop in front of me. "Thank God. Thank you. Thank you. They were just in here. They said they needed a payment, a deposit. They needed—" I raised my hand. A simple, flat gesture. It stopped him cold. "I am not here for you. Mark." He flinched, the hope on his face dying instantly. "What, but—" "Lily?" "Mrs. Vance." The administrator from behind the desk had come out. She was holding a tablet, her face professional. "We've been expecting you." "Is everything in order?" I asked. "Yes, ma'am," she said, tapping the screen. The wire transfer was confirmed about an hour ago. The Lily Vance Trust Fund has been activated and has assumed all financial responsibility for the patient. All current and future costs are fully covered. Mark was looking back and forth between us, his mind too slow, too broken, to keep up. The what? The Lily Vance Trust Fund. I turned to face my son for the last time. "When I sold the penthouse," I explained, my voice echoing slightly in the sterile hallway. "I did not keep the money. And when your father's trust was forfeited for violating the morals clause, the assets were not returned to me. I had Mr. Graves restructure everything." I pointed to the administrator, who was already turning to go back to her office. "I transferred every single penny, the money from the sale of the apartment, the money from your father's trust, everything that you and Chloe tried to steal from me into a new, irrevocable trust. It bears your daughter's name." Mark was staring at me, his mouth open. "The Lily Vance Trust Fund," I continued, "is managed by Mr. Graves and a board of trustees at this hospital. It will pay for 100% of Lily's medical care and for her education, including college, until she is 21 years old." I let the words sink in. I let him see the shape of the future I had built. You did that," he whispered. He was looking for the angle, the trick. So the money it's safe for her. It is safe from you," I said. "You will never touch a single cent of it. You are not a signatory. You are not a beneficiary. You have no legal access to it whatsoever. It is for her, and only her." He finally understood. The full crushing weight of it. This was not forgiveness. This was the final, perfect, legal act of my revenge. I had not just taken everything from him. I had taken his entire legacy, his inheritance, everything he was supposed to be, and I had bypassed him completely. I had erased him from the future. I had ensured his daughter would be safe, educated, and cared for. And I had ensured that he, her father, would have no part in it. He would be a ghost, watching his daughter's life be paid for by the money he had thrown away. You saved her," he said, tears welling in his eyes. "I saved my granddaughter," I corrected. "I left my son exactly where he chose to be." I looked at him one last time. This strange, broken man who wore my son's face. "You told me you had a real family. Mark, you chose it. Now, live with it." I turned. I walked out of the finance office, down the long, bright hallway. I did not look back. I could hear him call my name. Once. A desperate, broken sound. I did not stop. I pushed open the glass doors and walked out into the cold, morning rain, leaving him there, alone, homeless, and penniless in a hospital corridor, while his daughter was safe upstairs, cared for by the grandmother he had tried to destroy. Thank you so much for listening. Let us know where you're listening from in the comments below. We'd love to connect and hear your thoughts. Please subscribe to Grandma's Family Diary, like this video, and support us even more by hitting that super thanks button to help this story be heard by more people.